Commander Hal had seen disasters before. In his 20 years with the Galactic Emergency Response Consortium, he had pulled survivors from collapsed habitats, evacuated stations during solar flares, and coordinated rescues across half the known galaxy. He knew the protocols by heart, assess the situation, calculate the risks, extract what you can save, accept what you cannot. It was logical, it was efficient. It had worked for 3,000 years across 47 different species. But he had never seen anything like station. The call came in at 400 station time. Antimatter containment breach. The words alone made experienced responders pause. Antimatter was clean energy when controlled, but when containment failed, it was one of the most catastrophic events possible. The explosion had torn through 3 levels of the mining station, and the radiation was spreading fast. Hal's team arrived within 30 minutes. His ship, the Mercy of, was state-of-the-art. It carried the best equipment the consortium could provide, and his crew was trained to handle nearly any emergency. They established orbit at a safe distance and began their standard procedures. The drones went in first. Small automated units that could withstand higher radiation and gather detailed information without risking lives. The data they sent back made Hal's respiratory slits constrict with concern. Radiation levels were already at 4 times the fatal dose for most species. Structural integrity was failing rapidly. The station was tearing itself apart from the inside. Life signs? Hal asked his scanner operator, a young named whose crystalline form refracted the console lights into rainbow patterns. 317 detected, reported, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species. Mostly in the lower sections, some in the medical bay on level 7. Emergency bulkheads are holding in sectors 9 through 12. Hal studied the holographic display. The station rotated slowly before him, damage indicators glowing red across most of its structure. He ran the calculations quickly in his mind, cross-referencing with the protocols that had guided the consortium for. The math was brutal but clear. Launch rescue pods to sectors 9 through 12, he ordered. Those are the only areas with viable access and acceptable radiation levels. We can extract approximately 40 to 50 individuals safely. What about the others? Asked his second officer, whose 6 arms made him exceptional at managing multiple tasks. The radiation will kill them before we could reach them, Hal said quietly. And we cannot risk the team. You know the protocols, we save who we can save. It was the hardest part of the job, but it was necessary. Emergency responders who died trying to save the helped no one. The consortium had learned this lesson across thousands of incidents. Acceptable losses were a mathematical reality. Nodded slowly, though his mandibles clicked with displeasure. Understood, Commander. The rescue pods launched. Hal watched the operation unfold on his screens, coordinating with his team as they made contact with survivors in the safe zones. 53 people were being evacuated. 53 lives saved. It should have felt like a victory. But then something unexpected appeared on the sensors. Commander said, her voice sharp with surprise. I'm detecting movement in Sector 4. That's inside the red zone. Hal looked at the display. Sector 4 was a nightmare of radiation and structural damage. Nothing living should be moving in there. Check for drone malfunction. It's not the drones, sir. Multiple life signs. They're moving towards Sector 6, I count. 12 individuals, no, wait, 15. They're wearing protective suits. That's impossible, said. Those radiation levels would kill through any standard suit in minutes. Hal felt something cold settle in his stomach. Are they consortium personnel? Negative, sir. The signatures match human physiological patterns. Humans? Hal had read about them. Earth had joined the galactic community only 40 years ago, and humans were still considered newcomers. They ran several mining operations in the Outer Rim, including Station. He had heard they were stubborn and emotional, prone to making decisions based on feelings rather than logic. "What are they doing?" Hal whispered. The answer became clear as they watched. The humans were going into the most damaged sections of the station. They were going where the consortium had designated as unrecoverable. They were going where people were dying. "Get me a communication link," Hal ordered. "I need to speak with whoever is leading that group." The link crackled to life. A woman's voice came through, strained but steady. "This is Sarah, little busy right now." "Ms., this is Commander Hal of the Galactic Emergency Response Consortium. You need to evacuate immediately. The radiation in your current location is fatal." "Yeah, we know," replied. There were sounds of strain in the background, metal groaning and people shouting. "We've got 32 people trapped in the medical bay. They can't get out on their own. The medical bay is inaccessible. Our drones show the corridors are blocked, and the radiation exposure would kill you before you reached them." "Probably," said, "but we're going anyway." Hal felt his respiratory slits flare in agitation. "You don't understand. This is not survivable. You will die and you will not save them." "Maybe," said, "but I've been a paramedic for 15 years before I took this mining job. I didn't get into this work to let people die when there's even a chance. We'll talk later, Commander. Out." The link went dead. Hal stared at the display in disbelief. They were really doing it. The humans were pushing deeper into the station, into areas where his training and protocols said no one could survive. "Should we stop them?" asked. Hal replied. "We have no authority over civilian personnel, and we certainly can't go in after them." So they watched. The entire crew of the Mercy watched as the humans did the impossible. They cut through blocked corridors with plasma torches. They carried people through sections where the radiation counters screamed warnings. They improvised medical treatment in spaces that were venting to vacuum, using emergency sealant foam and portable force fields. One woman, Hal learned her name was, stayed behind in a collapsing corridor to brace a support beam with her own body while others carried injured past her. She was pulled out seconds before the ceiling collapsed. Another man, Williams, used his mining to tear through a jammed blast door, exposing himself to direct radiation to free a dozen trapped workers. And Sarah seemed to be everywhere at once. She coordinated the rescue efforts, performed medical procedures under impossible conditions, and refused to leave anyone behind. Every time Hal thought surely they would retreat, surely they would accept the losses, the humans went back in. Again and again. Hours passed. The station continued to deteriorate. Hal's crew had completed their evacuation of the safe zones, but they couldn't leave. They were transfixed by what they were witnessing. Even the logical, even the mathematical, watched as humans every calculation of survival. "Life signs emerging from the main airlock," reported. "It's them. They're bringing out more survivors." The rescue pods launched again, this time to collect the people the humans had saved. Hal watched the counts rise. 100, 150, 200. It seemed impossible. These were people who should have been dead, extracted from areas that should have been inaccessible. "Commander," said quietly, "their radiation exposure, look at their readings." Hal pulled up the medical data from the survivors' suits. His blood went cold. The humans had absorbed doses that would kill most species. Some of them were already showing signs of radiation sickness, and still they kept going back. "How many survivors have they extracted?" Hal asked. 263, sir," she replied, her voice filled with something that sounded like awe. "Final group is exiting now." The last group emerged from the airlock. Hal could see Sarah among them, supported by 2 of her team members. Her suit's radiation counter was flashing red emergency warnings. She had absorbed enough radiation to kill her 3 times over by consortium medical standards. As the last shuttle pulled away from station, the structure finally gave up. The remaining supports failed and the station began to break apart. If the humans had been 30 seconds slower, they would have been caught in the collapse. Hal ordered his medical bay to prepare for mass casualties. The human rescuers were brought aboard first, all 15 of them. They were suffering from severe radiation exposure, exhaustion, and various injuries. Sarah collapsed as soon as she was through the airlock, unconscious before the medical team reached her. The consortium's chief medical officer, a Tellurian named, examined the humans with visible concern. "Commander, I've never seen exposure this severe in living patients. By all our models, they should be dead already." "But they're alive," Hal said. "For now," replied grimly. "We'll do what we can, but I make no promises." Hal stood in the medical bay, looking at the unconscious forms of the human rescuers. Around them were the people they had saved. 263 individuals who would have died if the consortium had followed its protocols. 263 lives that the calculations said were unrecoverable. He pulled up his official report, the one he would send to consortium headquarters. The template was standard, with fields for casualties, response time, and protocol compliance. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then began to type. The numbers told one story. By consortium protocols, they should have saved 53 people from station. The humans, with no training in GERC procedures, with no respect for the calculated risks, had saved 263. The survival rate was 87.6% in conditions where the consortium projected 15%. Hal added a note at the end of his report. Request immediate review of current rescue protocols. Human methodology achieved results that contradict established models. Further study recommended. He submitted the report and returned to the medical bay. Sarah was still unconscious, but her vital signs were stabilizing, looked surprised. "Their biology is responding to treatment better than predicted. It's remarkable." Hal stood by his bed. She looked small and fragile, this human who had led her team into certain death and somehow survived. On her uniform, barely visible beneath the medical equipment, was a patch. It showed a star with a serpent wrapped around a staff, and words in Earth's common language. "What does it say?" Hal asked. One of the conscious humans answered from a nearby bed. Her voice was weak but steady. "It says paramedic, and underneath first in, last out. It means we go where people need help, and we don't leave until everyone's safe." "Even if it kills you?" Hal asked. Smiled faintly. "Especially then, that's the job, Commander." Hal didn't understand it. Not yet. But he knew he had witnessed something that would change everything. The Galactic Emergency Response Consortium had operated on logic and calculations for 3,000 years. The humans had just shown them that sometimes survival wasn't about the math. It was about refusing to accept what the math said was impossible. Sarah woke up 3 days later. The first thing she asked was whether everyone made it out. When they told her the numbers, she simply nodded and closed her eyes again, satisfied, as if saving 263 people from impossible odds was just another day at work. Hal's report reached consortium headquarters within a week. The response was immediate and divided. Some called the human actions reckless and dangerous. Others pointed to the numbers and demanded explanations. How had untrained civilians achieved rescue rates that exceeded the best consortium teams? But one thing was certain. The debate had begun, and across the galaxy, people were asking a question that had never been asked before. What if the protocols were wrong? What if there was another way? What if the humans, with their emotional decisions and their refusal to accept acceptable losses, were onto something that 3,000 years of logical response doctrine had missed? The incident at station was over, but the real rescue, the one that would save countless lives across the galaxy, was just beginning. The consortium council chamber was designed to impress. It was a massive sphere, with seating arranged in concentric rings that seemed to float in the air. Representatives from 47 species gathered here when matters of galactic importance needed to be decided. The architecture was meant to inspire cooperation and rational thought. Fire Chief didn't seem impressed. He stood in the center of the chamber, a stocky human with gray hair and a face that had seen too many fires, too many disasters, too many funerals. He wore his Earth Service uniform, dark blue with patches and medals that meant nothing to most species present, but he wore it with pride. Hal sat in the delegation section, watching as the human prepared to address the council. 6 months had passed since station. 6 months of reports, analysis, and increasingly heated debates about what the incident meant. The consortium had formed a special committee to study human emergency response methods. The committee's findings had led to this moment. High Counselor Thresh, an ancient whose scaled hide had darkened with age, called the session to order. We gather to address Proposal 7743, the integration of human emergency response methodology into consortium training protocols. Fire Chief of Earth will present the proposal. Chief, you may proceed. Nodded and tapped a control on his wrist device. A holographic display activated, showing footage from Earth. Thank you, High Counselor. I'm going to show you something. Just watch. The footage began. It showed a burning building on Earth, flames pouring from windows. Human firefighters rushed toward it, not away from it. They carried equipment and wore protective suits, but Hal could see from the heat readings that the conditions were extreme. The building was an inferno. The firefighters went inside. The recording showed helmet camera feeds, switching between different responders. They crawled through smoke-filled corridors, searched rooms where visibility was nearly zero, and called out for survivors. The audio picked up their breathing, harsh and labored through their respirators. One firefighter found a child, unconscious in a bedroom. He picked up the small form and began to carry it out, but the floor gave way. The firefighter fell into the flames below, still holding the child. The other firefighters immediately went after him. They formed a human chain, reaching down through the hole in the floor through the fire to pull both the firefighter and the child to safety. The footage switched to another incident, a Coast Guard helicopter hovering over stormy seas. The waves were enormous, easily 30 feet high. A ship was sinking. A human rescue swimmer jumped from the helicopter into that chaos. Hal watched as the swimmer battled the waves, reached the ship, and began pulling people into rescue baskets. The helicopter lifted them out one by one while the rescue swimmer stayed in the water in the storm until everyone was safe. More footage followed. Medics running toward gunfire to reach wounded people. Miners digging through rubble with their bare hands because the equipment was too slow. Search and rescue teams rappelling down cliffs in terrible weather to reach stranded climbers. Police officers shielding civilians with their own bodies. Every scene showed the same thing. Humans running toward danger while everyone else ran away. Humans refusing to give up even when the situation seemed hopeless. Humans saving people who should have been. The footage ended. The chamber was silent. "That's what we do," said simply. "That's what human first responders have always done. We don't calculate acceptable losses. We don't write people off because the math says they can't be saved. We go in, we do the job, and we bring everyone home, or we die trying." A representative stood. "With respect, Chief, what you're showing us is admirable but irrational. Those responders took enormous risks. Some of them died in those incidents, didn't they?" "Yes," said, "they did. Every year Earth loses hundreds of first responders in the line of duty. It's the hardest part of the job. We grieve for them, we honor them, and then we keep doing the job because it needs to be done." "But that's exactly the point," another representative argued, whose crystalline form glowed with agitation. "Your methods result in responder casualties. Our protocols are designed to minimize those casualties." "Your protocols also result in more civilian casualties," countered. "At station, your protocols said to save 53 people, and accept that the rest would die. Our people saved 263. Your people nearly died doing it, the shot back. Nearly, agreed. But they didn't, and neither did 263 other people who would have died if we'd followed your protocols. The representative spoke again. You're asking us to abandon 3,000 years of proven methodology. Our protocols have saved millions of lives across the galaxy. I'm not asking you to abandon anything, said. I'm asking you to expand your options, to consider that maybe there's room for both approaches. Your protocols work well for certain situations, but there are other situations where our methods could save more lives. At what cost? Demanded a Tellurian representative. How many rescue workers are you willing to sacrifice for these additional saves? His face hardened. I've been a firefighter for 30 years. I've lost friends. I've lost people I trained. I've stood at more funerals than I can count. So don't talk to me about cost. Every single person who does this job knows the risks. We accept them. Because someone has to. Because those people in the burning building, in the sinking ship, in the collapsed mine, they're worth it. He paused, looking around the chamber. You want to talk about cost? Let's talk about it. On Earth, we have a saying. Risk a little to save a little, risk a lot to save a lot. We teach that to every first responder. It means you assess the situation and you match your response to what's at stake. You don't take stupid risks for property or animals, but for human lives, for any lives, you do what needs to be done. Tapped his control again. New data appeared on the display. These are the statistics from every major rescue operation in the past 50 years across consortium space. I've compared your survival rates to similar incidents on Earth that used human methodology. On average, human methods achieve 15 to 20% higher survival rates in high-casualty events. The numbers floated in the air for everyone to see. They were undeniable. But there's something else, continued. Something that doesn't show up in the statistics. When people know that rescuers won't give up on them, when they know that someone will come for them no matter what, it gives them hope. It makes them fight to survive. And that can make all the difference. A long silence followed. Finally, High Counselor Thresh spoke. Chief, your proposal raises significant concerns. You're asking us to put more responders at risk. You're asking us to set aside proven protocols. These are not small matters. No, they're not, agreed. But I'm also offering to save more lives. Isn't that what this organization is supposed to be about? We will need time to consider this, Thresh said. The Council will deliberate and vote at our next session in 30 days. The session ended. Hal made his way down to the main floor as the chamber emptied. He found standing alone, staring at the display that still showed the statistics. Chief, Hal said, a word. Turned, Commander Hal, I read your report on station, very thorough. Thank you, Hal said. I wanted to tell you that your presentation was compelling, but I'm not sure it will be enough. The Council is deeply divided on this issue. I know, said quietly. Half of them think we're heroes. The other half think we're suicidal maniacs. Are you, Hal asked, suicidal? Smiled faintly. No, Commander, we're not suicidal. We're just people who believe that every life matters, that no one should be written off as an acceptable loss, that if there's even a chance to save someone, you take it. Even if it means dying. Even then, said, because that's what makes us different from the people we're saving. They didn't choose to be in that disaster. They didn't volunteer for it, but we did. We chose this job knowing the risks, so if someone has to take those risks, it should be us. We're ready for it. Hal was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about Sarah, the woman from station. She nearly died saving those people. When she woke up, the first thing she asked was whether everyone made it out, not about herself, about them. That sounds about right, said. I don't understand it, Hal admitted. By any logical calculation, she should have retreated. She should have accepted the losses, but she didn't. Logic isn't everything, Commander said. Sometimes you have to follow your heart, your instinct, your sense of duty, knew those people needed help. She knew she might be able to provide it, so she did. That's not complicated. That's just being a first responder. Over the next 30 days, 3 more emergencies occurred in consortium space. The coincidence was unfortunate, but it proved decisive. At 2 of the incidents, human advisors were present. At 1, they were not. The incident without human involvement was a habitat failure on a research station. The consortium team responded according to protocols. They established a safe perimeter, assessed the risks, and conducted a careful extraction. They saved 41 people. 63 died because they were in areas deemed too dangerous to access. The first incident with human involvement was a ship collision near a trade hub. The consortium team arrived first and began standard procedures. The human advisor, a woman named Captain who had trained with the Nigerian Navy before joining the Merchant Marine, suggested a different approach. She proposed using the debris field itself as cover to approach the damaged ships more quickly. The consortium commander, remembering station, agreed to try. They saved 97 people, 34 more than the initial calculations projected. The second incident with human involvement was a colony dome breach on a barely terraformed world. The atmosphere outside was toxic, and the breach was spreading. Protocols called for evacuating the intact sections and abandoning the damaged areas. But the human advisor, a man named Lieutenant Park who had served as a firefighter in South Korea, noticed something. The breach pattern suggested they could create a temporary seal using the colony's construction equipment. It was risky. It required putting responders directly in the path of the breach, but they tried it, and it worked. The temporary seal held long enough to evacuate everyone, 0 casualties. When the council reconvened, the debate was shorter than expected. The numbers spoke for themselves, but it was Hal who ultimately made the difference. He stood and requested permission to speak. "I was the commander at station," he said. "I filed the report that began this debate. I want to tell you what I learned that day." The chamber grew quiet. Hal continued. "I learned that protocols are valuable. They provide structure and safety. They've saved countless lives over the centuries. But I also learned that protocols have limits. They're based on calculations and averages and acceptable losses. They're logical and rational." He paused. But life isn't always logical. Disasters don't follow rules. And sometimes the rational thing to do is to be irrational, to refuse to accept what the calculations say is impossible, to try one more thing, push one more minute, risk one more attempt. The humans at station violated every protocol we have. They should have died. The people they saved should have been unreachable, but they didn't die and those people were reached. Because the humans refused to quit. They refused to accept that anyone was beyond saving. Hal looked directly at High Counselor Thresh. Logic is central to our culture. I've based my entire career on rational decision-making and calculated risks. But after station, I understand something new. Sometimes the most logical thing you can do is to believe in the illogical. To have faith that determination and courage can achieve what the math says is impossible. "I support this proposal," Hal concluded, "not because I'm abandoning logic but because I'm expanding it. The humans have shown us that our calculations were incomplete. They were missing a variable: hope, determination, the refusal to quit. These things have value. They save lives. And isn't that what we're supposed to do?" The vote was close. 26 species in favor, 18 against, 3 abstaining, but it passed. The Galactic Emergency Response Consortium would begin integrating human emergency response methodology into their training protocols. It would be voluntary at first, with pilot programs and careful monitoring. But it would happen. After the vote found Hal in one of the chamber's anterooms. "Thank you, Commander. Your speech made the difference." "I simply told the truth," Hal said. "Your people changed my mind. Sarah changed my mind. She showed me that there's more to rescue work than calculations." She'd be proud to hear that, said. She's back on Earth now, by the way, recovered from the radiation exposure. She's training other paramedics in advanced disaster response. Good, Hal said. The galaxy needs more people like her. We'll train them, promised. We'll teach your people everything we know. How to push limits, how to improvise, how to never give up. But the most important thing we'll teach them is this: every life is worth the risk. No one is an acceptable loss. Everyone matters. Hal extended his hand, a human gesture he had learned, shook it firmly. Welcome to the job, Commander, said with a smile. Fair warning, it's going to get harder before it gets easier, but it's worth it, I promise you that. As Hal left the chamber, he felt something he hadn't expected: anticipation, almost excitement. For 3,000 years, the consortium had operated one way. Now they were trying something new, something human. It was illogical and risky and potentially dangerous. It was going to save so many lives. The call came in during what should have been a quiet shift. Passenger liner Celestial Dawn, 4,000 souls aboard, had lost power near the Helix Nebula. They were drifting toward a collapsing star. Commander Hal was on duty when the alert came through. His ship, still the Mercy of, was the nearest consortium vessel. He acknowledged the call and set course immediately. Time to intercept, he asked, who was still his second officer 2 years after station. 47 minutes, replied. But Commander, the stellar mechanics are problematic. That star is in the final stages of collapse. The gravitational forces will tear the liner apart within 2 hours of our arrival. Hal pulled up the data, was right. The Celestial Dawn had suffered a catastrophic power failure that left it unable to maneuver. The collapsing star's gravity was pulling it in, and without power, the liner couldn't escape. Calculate evacuation capacity, Hal ordered. Worked at her console, her crystalline form reflecting the urgency of the situation. Based on our shuttle capacity and the time available, we can evacuate approximately 1,000 passengers. Perhaps slightly more if conditions are optimal. 1,000 out of 4,000, 25%. It was a disaster of terrible proportions, but it was what the numbers said was possible. Hal felt something twist in his chest. 2 years ago, he would have accepted those numbers. He would have prepared to save the 1,000 and mourn the rest. But that was before station, before Sarah and her impossible rescue, before he learned that sometimes the numbers were wrong. Where's Lieutenant Park? Hal asked. Sarah had returned to Earth, but the consortium had begun assigning human advisors to all major rescue ships. Lieutenant Park, the firefighter who had solved the colony dome breach, was now permanently stationed on the Mercy of. He had been training the crew in human methods for 18 months. Park arrived on the bridge within minutes. He was a compact man with steady hands and eyes that seemed to see solutions where others saw problems. Commander. We have a situation, Hal explained. 4,000 people, 2 hours. Our current capacity allows us to save 1,000. Park studied the display. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Show me everything. The liner's specs, the debris field around the star, what equipment we have available, other ships in the area, everything." The data filled the screens. Park walked through it all, his mind clearly racing. "Okay," he said finally. 1,000 is what we can save if we do things the standard way, but we're not going to do things the standard way." "What are you suggesting?" Hal asked. "We're going to save all of them," Park said simply. The bridge went quiet. His mandibles clicked with disbelief. "Lieutenant, the calculations are clear. We don't have enough time or resources." "The calculations are based on standard procedures," Park replied. "We're going to do something different. Commander, do you trust me?" Hal thought about station, about Sarah carrying people through lethal radiation, about humans refusing to accept acceptable losses. He had voted to bring human methods into the consortium. Now it was time to fully commit to that decision. "I trust you," Hal said. "What do you need?" Park smiled. "I need everyone to think like a first responder. No acceptable losses. No one left behind. We try everything and we don't quit until everyone is safe." The plan Park outlined was audacious. It violated multiple protocols and required coordination that seemed impossible. But as he explained each step, Hal began to see how it might work. The Celestial Dawn had lost main power, but its emergency systems were still functional. Park proposed using mining charges from the Mercy of's cargo hold to alter the debris field around the collapsing star. They would create a temporary barrier that would shield the liner from the worst gravitational forces, buying them precious minutes. Meanwhile, they would link every shuttle's power core together and use them to jumpstart the liner's auxiliary engines. It wouldn't be enough to break free of the star's gravity, but it might be enough to stabilize the ship and slow its drift. They would also send out an emergency call to every ship in the sector. Any vessel that could reach them would contribute their shuttles and crew to the evacuation. It would require coordinating dozens of ships and hundreds of crew members in a high-stress environment. "It's never been done before," said quietly. "That's not a reason not to try," Park replied. "On Earth we have another saying, first time for everything. Let's make this work." The Mercy of dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the Celestial Dawn. The sight was terrible. The passenger liner was a massive vessel, designed to carry thousands in comfort across the stars. Now it tumbled helplessly toward disaster, its lights flickering, its hull already showing stress fractures from the gravitational forces. "All hands, this is Commander Hal," he announced over the ship-wide channel. "We have 4,000 lives to save and 2 hours to do it. I won't lie to you. This is going to be the hardest operation any of us have ever attempted, but we're going to do it. We're going to bring everyone home. Follow Lieutenant Park's instructions. Trust your training. And remember, we don't quit." The crew responded with a determination that surprised Hal. 2 years of training with human advisors had changed them. They didn't question the impossible task. They simply prepared to attempt it. The mining charges launched first. Park had calculated the precise placement needed to shift the debris field. The explosions bloomed silently in space, and massive chunks of stellar debris began to move, forming a crude barrier between the liner and the star's strongest gravitational pull. "It's working," reported with astonishment. "The drift rate is decreasing." "Phase 2, Park ordered. "Get those shuttles moving." Every shuttle the Mercy of carried launched simultaneously. They attached to the Celestial Dawn's hull and began linking their power cores. It was delicate work, made more dangerous by the gravitational forces still affecting the liner. One shuttle pilot, unnamed, had to manually adjust his approach 6 times to compensate for the unpredictable drift. On the bridge, Hal coordinated the arriving ships. 3 cargo haulers had diverted course to help. A military patrol ship was inbound. Even a small civilian transport had answered the call. Every vessel brought additional shuttles, additional crew, additional capacity. "Lieutenant Park," Hal said, "we have 17 additional ships offering assistance." Park grinned. "That's what I like to hear. Get them organized. I want evacuation teams ready to deploy the moment we stabilize the liner." The power transfer began. The linked shuttle cores fed energy into the Celestial Dawn's emergency systems. Lights came on across the liner's hull. Interior systems began to respond. And slowly, incredibly, the auxiliary engines fired.